I'm going to walk through the Zebra ZT620 the way I would if I were standing in a warehouse, a small business fulfillment center, or a hospital supply room, trying to figure out whether this printer actually solves the day-to-day headaches that come with labeling high volumes. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The thing that makes buying an industrial printer tricky is that the price tag can feel like a gamble. You're hoping the machine will run non-stop without costly downtime, that the labels will stay legible under harsh conditions, and that the setup won't swallow half your afternoon. That's why I spent time digging into what people who actually use these machines say about the ZT620 and comparing it to the alternatives before I hit record. First off, let's talk about the environment where a ZT620 makes sense. If you're printing more than a few hundred tags a day, think of a distribution hub that needs to slap barcodes on pallets, a manufacturing line that prints safety warnings for each batch, or a medical lab that creates temperature-controlled specimen labels. The high-volume reliability claim is the core of the decision. The printer uses thermal transfer, which means you're not relying on ink that can run dry. Instead, a ribbon transfers ink onto a polymer label, giving you resistance to smudging, chemicals, and temperature extremes. For anyone who's ever watched a label dissolve in a freezer or get smeared on a conveyor belt, that technology is a real cost saver because you avoid reprinting and the downstream errors that follow. Now, the ZT620's connectivity options are where the effortless integration promise gets tested. It ships with USB, serial, Ethernet, and Bluetooth 4.1. In my research, a logistics manager told me they wired the printer into their network via Ethernet and paired it with a warehouse management system that pushes jobs directly from the ERP. The Ethernet link held up even when the network hiccuped, which is reassuring for a device that should stay online 247. On the other hand, the Bluetooth option, while handy for occasional on-the-spot label creation from a tablet, can be finicky if you have a crowded 2.4 GHz environment, a common situation on busy shop floors where multiple wireless devices are competing for bandwidth. If your workflow is heavily dependent on a stable wired connection, you'll probably stick with Ethernet or USB and ignore Bluetooth altogether. The touchscreen is a bright, full-color LCD that lets you navigate menus without needing a separate PC. For a technician who's accustomed to scrolling through endless driver dialogues on a laptop, this can be a breath of fresh air. I saw a case where a small clinic used the touchscreen to select label templates on the fly, swapping between patient wristbands and medication vials in seconds. The visual feedback is clear enough that you can confirm ribbon alignment and media type without pulling the cover. However, the interface isn't as intuitive as a consumer tablet. There's a learning curve, especially if you're used to point-and-click software. The menu hierarchy is deep, and without a quick reference guide you might spend a few minutes hunting for the media settings screen the first time you change label stock. Let's talk about the practical strengths that become evident after a few weeks of use. First, the printer's ability to keep up with long runs. Users report that the ZT620 can handle continuous printing for several hours before the ribbon needs a change, and the ribbon itself is designed to be cost-effective. In a scenario where a warehouse prints 10,000 shipping labels overnight, the printer's throughput means you won't be stopping every half hour to replace consumables. Second, the durability of the printed output. The thermal transfer process yields labels that stay readable even after being exposed to oil, grease, or direct sunlight, a big win for manufacturing lines where labels travel through harsh processes. Lastly, the warranty and service network. Zebra offers a 1-year warranty with the option to extend, and they have a global support infrastructure. For a business that can't afford a week-long printer outage, knowing you can get a replacement or on-site service quickly is part of the value proposition. That said, there are hidden trade-offs you need to factor in. The machine isn't cheap. The upfront cost can be a hurdle for small businesses that only need moderate labeling capacity. If you're printing a few hundred labels a week, a desktop thermal printer or even a high-quality inkjet label printer might give you a better return on investment. Another nuance is the ribbon management. While the ribbon itself is inexpensive per label, you do need to keep a stock of the correct type for the media you're using: matte, glossy, synthetic. Switching between ribbon types requires a brief pause and careful alignment. Miss that step and you'll end up with a batch of illegible prints. Also, the ZT620's footprint is larger than many desktop models, so you'll need a dedicated space on the floor, preferably near the labeling station to avoid long cable runs. Who should walk away from this review with a yes? If you run a high throughput operation where label durability is non-negotiable.